This is the India-Bangladesh border. Look closely at this section. See those little dots of one country completely surrounded by the other? These are called enclaves, pieces of one country entirely inside another. And this border had 198 of them. Some Indian villages were surrounded by Bangladesh. Some Bangladeshi villages were surrounded by India. And some enclaves were inside other enclaves, creating 3 levels of national territory. For 68 years, thousands of people were trapped in geographic limbo. This is the story of the world's most complicated border and how it finally got fixed. The India-Bangladesh border is 4,096 kilometers long. Most of it is normal, a line separating 2 countries. But in one region near the northern districts, the border becomes absolute chaos. Before 2015, there were 198 enclaves. 106 Bangladeshi enclaves inside India and 92 Indian enclaves inside Bangladesh. These enclaves housed about 50,000 people who technically lived in one country but were physically surrounded by another. Some of these enclaves were tiny, less than a hectare. Others were several square kilometers with thousands of residents. And the most bizarre part? Some had counter-enclaves and even counter-enclaves, pieces of India inside Bangladesh, inside India, inside Bangladesh. To understand this mess, we have to go back to the 17th and 18th centuries. This region was ruled by various princely states and kingdoms. The Maharaja of Cooch Behar controlled territory in the area. The Mughal Empire and later regional rulers controlled surrounding areas. When kingdoms fought, the winner would sometimes capture isolated pockets of enemy territory, a village here, some farmland there. These became territorial islands, and because the losing ruler surrendered them as peace settlements, they became permanent. But nobody cared about precise borders back then. There were no hard lines, just areas of influence. A village might pay taxes to one ruler while the next village over paid another. It was messy but functional in a pre-modern context. Show British colonial administration. When the British colonized India, they inherited this chaos. British surveyors mapped the region and officially documented all these enclaves. But they didn't fix them. Fixing would require negotiating with local rulers, which was complicated and seemed unnecessary at the time. So the British just recorded them. This village is part of Cooch Behar, even though it's surrounded by Rangpur territory. Problem documented, problem ignored. Then came 1947. British India was partitioned into India and Pakistan. The colonial-era borders became international borders. Suddenly, those feudal enclaves weren't just administrative quirks. They were foreign territories. A village that was Cooch Behar territory surrounded by Rangpur territory became Indian territory surrounded by Bangladesh. This wouldn't have been such a disaster except for one thing. Nobody planned for it. There were no roads connecting enclaves to their home countries. No way to administer them. No way for residents to access government services. Imagine living in one of these enclaves. You're an Indian citizen living in an Indian village, but you're completely surrounded by Bangladesh. To reach India, you have to cross an international border, which means you need a passport and visa. But here's the problem. You can't get a passport because you can't reach an Indian passport office without crossing Bangladesh, which requires a visa you can't get because you don't have a passport. You're stuck. Residents of enclaves had no access to government services, banking systems, legal documentation, voting rights, infrastructure. Some enclaves had no electricity until the 2000s. Medical emergencies meant crossing an international border without permission, technically illegal or dying. Children couldn't attend school in the surrounding country because they were foreigners. The enclaves became havens for smuggling and crime. Because neither country could effectively police them, criminals used them as hiding spots. Moving cattle, drugs, or illegal goods across the border? Route them through an enclave where border police can't follow. Some enclave residents turned to smuggling because they had no other economic options. They couldn't legally work in the surrounding country, couldn't access their home country, and had no legitimate economy. Now here's where it gets truly absurd. Counter-enclaves. These are enclaves inside other enclaves. Dahala Kagrabari was a piece of India inside a piece of Bangladesh, inside a piece of India inside Bangladesh. It was the world's only counter-counter enclave. The residents lived in India, surrounded by Bangladesh, which was surrounded by India, which was surrounded by Bangladesh. To reach mainland India, they had to cross 3 international borders. Only a few families lived there, around 50 people total. They were arguably the most isolated community on Earth. No roads reached them, no government services. They farmed, lived in extreme poverty, and were essentially forgotten by both countries. In 2015, when the enclave exchange finally happened, these residents had to choose: become Bangladeshi or relocate to India. Most chose to become Bangladeshi because that's where they had lived their entire lives, even though technically they were Indians. For decades, India and Bangladesh discussed fixing this problem. Treaties were signed in 1958, 1974, and 2011, but neither country fully ratified them. Political opposition, nationalist concerns, and bureaucratic inertia kept delaying implementation. Finally, in 2015, both countries simultaneously ratified the Land Boundary Agreement. The solution was simple: exchange all enclaves. Indian enclaves inside Bangladesh became part of Bangladesh. Bangladeshi enclaves inside India became part of India. Residents were given a choice: accept citizenship in the country where their enclave physically existed or relocate to their home country. Over 90% chose to stay and switch citizenship. Why? Because despite being technically Indian or Bangladeshi, they had lived their entire lives surrounded by the other country. They spoke the local language, had local connections, and owned land there. On August 1st, 2015, the exchange happened. 111 Indian enclaves officially became Bangladesh. 51 Bangladeshi enclaves officially became India. The world's most complicated border was finally fixed. After 2015, former enclave residents finally got citizenship documents, access to government services, voting rights, legal land titles, bank accounts, schools, and medical care. For the first time in 68 years, they were actual citizens with rights. Children could attend school. Sick people could access hospitals legally. Farmers could get bank loans and crop insurance. Bangladesh and India began developing former enclaves, building roads, extending electricity, establishing police posts. Places that were lawless and forgotten became integrated into their countries. But challenges remain. Many former enclave residents are still poor. Decades of isolation left them educationally and economically behind. Integration is ongoing. So here's what makes this border story different from others. It wasn't about war or disputed territory. Both countries agreed the enclaves were absurd. The problem was that fixing them required political will and bureaucratic cooperation, which took 68 years to achieve. For nearly 7 decades, 50,000 people lived in geographic limbo because feudal rulers centuries ago gambled villages in territorial disputes, and because modern countries couldn't agree on how to fix it. The India-Bangladesh enclave exchange is one of the few border disputes that ended peacefully with a solution that actually worked. No forced relocations, no ethnic cleansing. Just 2 countries agreeing that medieval borders had no place in the modern world. Today, the India-Bangladesh border is still long and complicated, but it's no longer insane. And 50,000 people finally have a country they can actually reach.